Hey everybody, it's Tony Cottaspoti from GreatVocalMajority.com, website, YouTube channel, podcast. And today I want to talk about something that everybody's talked about for the last 2 years. It's about the presidential election in 2016, because people are still wondering, how did Donald Trump win? How did he win the presidency? He had no organization to speak of. He didn't spend nearly as much money as any of his competitors, either in the primaries or in the actual general election. He has a style that can charitably be described as unconventional, but's more often described as rude and even boorish. So how did he win? Well, it really comes down to being able to read a map, if you really want to know. Now, here's what I mean. I want you to take a look at this graphic. Take a look at this map. It's the presidential election map by county, the results by county in 2012. And you've probably seen maps like this going back to when Bush won in 2000, and the 2004 map, again 2008, and so on. Now, what can we glean from this map? Well, we can see that, at least territorially, the Democrats are very concentrated in their support centers. They are largely in urban areas. And if we were to drill into each of those areas, what we would find is that the Democrat Party enjoys overwhelming support in those very heavily populated urban centers. And when you move out from that urban center into the suburban areas, that support begins to go down. Republicans begin to have more of a popularity once you're in the suburban areas, and then as you move further out into the areas that we now call ex-urban, those areas are a little bit more Republican. And then you get into the rural areas, and those areas are generally considered to be Republican areas. So the Democrat popularity dwindles the further you go out from a city center, and Republican popularity rises. Now, what Trump needed to do in order to win was to win those red areas, those areas outside of cities, by a wider margin than the previous failed Republican candidates, McCain and Romney. And because while those areas, those red areas, are Republican, they're not uniformly Republican the way Democrat urban areas are uniformly Democrat. In increasing the Republican margin in Republican districts sounds simple. It is a simple concept. The challenge is making it happen. The strategy Trump used was really quite simple. It was even elegant, I think, and quite frankly, beautiful. It was his specific brand of populist messaging that only he really, among all of the candidates, could really properly represent. Trump tapped into Republican voter frustration with the establishment Republicans to gain that nomination. And he assailed the other Republican candidates' failures, some of whom were congressmen and senators, if you remember. He assailed them for their failure to address the concerns of issues like illegal immigration and taxes and terrorism, crime. I mean, a whole bunch of issues that were important to the middle class and working class people that are Republican voters that live outside of cities where Republicans generally enjoy a fair amount of control. So these were the common concerns across the GOP political spectrum. And Trump's message unified the Republican voters around these issues in a common cause. Trump, after all, was an insurgent candidate. And while he was doing this, The Democrat Party and Hillary Clinton did exactly what they shouldn't have done, and it trapped them. They trapped themselves, actually, by disparaging Trump supporters. Now, long before Clinton referred to Trump supporters as a basket of deplorables, Democrats in the news media were belittling the intellect of Trump and his supporters. I mean, you had all kinds of people in media, entertainment, the news. You know, Trump's name would come up as a viable presidential candidate, and there would be uproarious laughter, and they just looked down their nose at the possibility that Donald Trump could be a viable presidential candidate. And one after another, these luminaries of news and entertainment just laughed Trump off as an absurdity and someone not to be taken seriously. And why wouldn't they think this way? Stop and think about where all these people live. Think about where the news people live and the entertainment people. They live in these highly concentrated Democrat-controlled areas. Every last one of them is like that. Every last one of them comes from a Democrat stronghold. And they all interact with people who come from essentially the same places, and although they probably never considered themselves isolated into an elitist bubble, that's exactly what they were. The ridicule of many who publicly admitted supporting Trump was very common. It was so common, in fact, it drove his supporters into silence. It drove them underground. Why bring on ridicule?
If you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis going, you here, you here. And I think we now have to flip it. And it's a given the evilness of Donald Trump.
If you hold down the woman while the rapist is raping her, and you didn't rape her, are you a rapist?
Tens of millions of people voted for him after he showed his cards for years.
But are you, are you suggesting that they're racist, or they're...
Yes.
The people who vote, all the people who voted for Donald Trump are racist?
Yes.
If Republicans weren't so racist, they could encourage black people who are morally conservative to be on their side.
Those people who are supporting what he's doing here are racist, period.
It's movements and people that are speaking up for things, whether we're talking about civil rights movement, whatever else, those movements should be nonviolent, but they should not be non-confrontational.
And so these policies that this administration is putting forth are intentionally cruel, they are racist, and it is our job as citizens to speak out against that. Now, does that mean that we're going to be violent? No. But does that mean that Sarah Sanders can have a nice, quiet dinner with her family when she's taking our tax dollars to implement this policy? I don't think so.
Anybody who votes for and supports a racist is a racist. You are culpable, white America. I'm sorry.
Is it complicit or either you're enabling?
You know.
But you guys were involved with being patriotic, right?
Very, very patriotic, but not...
Being patriotic was the group that contacted and helped organize some of these activities that you posted on your own Facebook account.
Those were legitimate.
Those were Russians.
They were not Russians. I don't go with the Russians.
Laid out very clearly what his interests are.
President Walker, how do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
Why 25% of the country, whether it's 25, 20, 30%, are hardcore racist. They do not want to see brown people coming into America. That's just what's going on here. I mean,
of certain individuals and institutions, we will, as per Chief Jim Hopper, punch some people in the face when they seek to destroy the meek and the disenfranchised and the marginalized. And we will do it all with soul, with heart, and with joy.
There are still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated in it, in that prejudice and racism, and they just have to die.
A lot of his supporters believe that we are the enemy of the American people, and that is really, really an awful situation.
If you like Trump and you think he would make a good president, why would you want to alienate friends that you knew thought the other way? Why would you want to have them rain all this criticism down on you? You would just, just give them lip service and yes them to death, just so you could avoid it. Now, this wasn't the first time a popular candidate's supporters were driven underground. It happened in 1980. In fact, during the election cycle, I brought up many times that I felt that the 2016 election was shaping up just like the 1980 election, in the sense that it was driving the supporters of the Republican candidate into silence, and that fooled the media and everybody else into thinking that it drove people away from the candidate himself, when it actually didn't do anything of the sort. Because in 1980, Ronald Reagan was so heavily criticized by the liberal media, his supporters were shouted into silence until Election Day. Just in 1980, just as happened in 2016, the media on election night sat staring and slack-jawed, completely in shock. Trump's message was simple, and it resonated well enough with the Republican electorate to boost his margins in Republican-leaning areas. Trump knew that ex-urban and suburban areas around the country held many views in common, and his populist messaging united them. That's how Trump won. President Trump has earned a great deal of goodwill with those very same voters by holding fast and keeping his promises, at least as many as he could keep. The country does seem to be improving economically. I don't think anybody can argue that it hasn't. It's improved in every area Trump said he would address. It's improved in energy. It's improved in diplomatic relations. It's improved in militarily. We've made progress with our enemies. We've made progress on trade deals. I mean, Trump has done a lot with not a lot of support, you have to say. But this has left the Democrats with no choice but to attempt to criminalize the presidency now. For the past 2 years, Trump's election win has been the subject of investigation without any evidence brought forward to confirm criminality connected with the election at all. And with the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh as Supreme Court Justice, the American left has no governmental avenue, anyway, by which it can impose its agenda on the country. Now, this has raised the stakes for the 2018 midterm elections. Democrats are desperate to regain power and are hoping to win back the House and the Senate. If they do win back either or both, what Americans witnessed during the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings will be duplicated in a number of congressional investigations that will, let's face it, all be witch hunts. And they'll end up leading to the 2020 presidential race. And I think the Democrats have a very great risk of overdoing it. I mean, people in the country are not going to be happy watching constant attacks on the president. They'll get their media hounds to go along with them, but whether any of it is true or not, but the problem's going to happen is that people are going to become fatigued. The Democrats are hoping they become fatigued of Trump. What may actually happen is they'll grow fatigued of the Democrats, because they're not dealing with a president like any other. I mean, Donald Trump is a fighter, and he's going to come out and he's going to confront these guys. He's not going to let them take him down, without a fight at least. And there's really no place for the Democrats to go on this. Even if they do draft articles of impeachment and send it over to the Senate, there's not going to be 67 votes in the Senate to convict Donald Trump. Just not going to happen. So it's going to be a bunch of fury, and it's going to lead nowhere. So the choice in November is really very simple. It's either going to be endless investigations if the Democrats win, crippling the government, or Trump further implementing his agenda, which has so far made the country better. The American people are going to render their judgment in a few weeks. It's unclear how it will go, but whichever way it does, a lot of people are going to be unhappy either way. Even though most Americans loathe the spectacle of Kavanaugh-type witch hunts, it's really not clear that they have drawn a line from their vote to a particular Democrat candidate to the actions enabling witch hunts. I mean, they have to realize, voters need to realize that if you vote a Democrat into power, no matter how that Democrat says that they're not going to be a slave to Pelosi or Schumer, keep in mind that if you aren't a slave to your leadership, you're not going to get a plum committee assignment. You're going to just wallow, and you're going to have to vote with the team, or you're going to get froze out, and you're never going to get reelected. They'll primary you. So this is where we're going in November. Now, I did a little bit of analysis of the House congressional races that supposedly competitive by 538.com, and I took a look at several factors. I'm not going to go into them here, but my guess is that the Democrats will not win the House. They will win 13 seats, but they're going to lose 3. And I think what's going to end up happening is that the Democrats will have a net gain of 10 seats short of what they need. So the Republicans are still going to control the House by a narrower margin. And that'll be that. And I think the Republicans will maintain control of the Senate. I don't really have any question about that right now. Of course, things could change. Several weeks to go. There's always going to be surprises, especially in this environment. But I really wanted to explain how I think Trump won, because a lot of people seem to be confused, especially people who supported Clinton, how it could possibly have happened. Some people are even posting things on the internet and on Facebook that the margin of Trump in so many states was virtually impossible, statistically impossible, which is hilarious because President Obama won 4 states by a very, very slightly greater margin than Trump did, which if he lost those states, he would have lost the election. So Trump did the same thing, but it was just a little bit closer. It's really all it was. But there are a lot of people that really are trying to validate their view that the election was stolen. And it wasn't. It's just close. That's the way it is these days. That's it for me. I'm Tony Codispati from Great Vocal Majority. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks.